Welcome to today's episode, where we dive into the vibrant celebration of Dia de los Muertos, the Mexican holiday celebrated on November 1st and 2nd, rooted in a beautiful fusion of indigenous traditions and Catholic beliefs. Far from fearing death, this holiday honors it as a natural part of life's cycle, creating a joyful connection between the living and their departed loved ones. In this episode, my guest is Sylvia Orozco, Executive Director of Mexic-Arte Museum. As we explore the heart of downtown Austin, where over 20,000 people gathered for a spectacular Dia de los Muertos event. To my surprise, this wasn't just a celebration for Latinos. People of all backgrounds, including non-Hispanic locals and international visitors, were embracing the festivities. Listen in as we reflect on the meaning of this cherished tradition and hear firsthand from attendees on the streets of Austin. Discover how Dia de los Muertos is evolving into a shared cultural experience, bridging communities and inviting everyone to honor those who are no longer with us.
I'm James Yeager from Austin, Texas, and we celebrate it just because I think although it's celebrating death, you're also celebrating life, and I think it's a great holiday.
Hi, my name is Ariana Mata, and I celebrate Dia de los Muertos to remember my ancestors and remember the family that I've lost.
I celebrate it to honor our traditions, honor our heritage, honor our ancestors that are always with us. My name is Justin. I'm from Brownsville, Texas.
Buen dia. I am from Ukraine originally, but I've been living in Austin for 8 years. And I celebrate Dia de los Muertos because I always say, even though I was born in Ukraine, my soul and my heart is from Mexico.
So buckle up, listeners. It's time that we unearth the origins, traditions, and the deeper meaning of Dia de los Muertos.
Welcome to the Latino Business Report. This podcast covers business, people, and issues of the day from a Latino perspective. The Latino Business Report is brought to you by TAMAC, the Texas Association of Mexican American Chambers of Commerce. TAMAC is the leading Hispanic business organization in Texas since 1975. Now for your host, J.R. Gonzalez.
Hello, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Latino Business Report. And this episode is pre-Halloween, pre-All Saints Day, pre-Dia de los Muertos, and Dia de los Muertos is what we're going to be talking about today. Our guest today is Sylvia Orozco, and she is the Executive Director of Mexic-Arte Museum in Austin, Texas, a museum that very honored to have served on the board of directors of many, many years ago, and just an amazing place. But Sylvia, how are you doing today?
Fine, thank you. My best. It is the best part of the year.
Best part of the year for you, definitely. And Sylvia, before we get started into it, I just want to say congratulations. I attended your Dia de los Muertos celebration last Saturday in downtown Austin, Texas, with the parade, the pageantry, the fanfare, the food. It was amazing. How many people did you have out there that day?
Well, the city estimates about 20,000 people attend, watch the parade and the festival. And another, probably about 2,000 people were actually in the parade.
Wow. How long did the parade last? I know it was a big parade.
This year it was about an hour and a half.
Amazing. And the city estimated, 20,000 people in attendance?
20,000 people. We get a lot of tourists. We get a lot of families, a lot of schools, downtown public, a lot of volunteers. Everybody comes out.
Well, I'm gonna say there's more than 20,000 because as Latinos we're always undercounted. Anytime they want to count us, they always undercount us. Unless of course it's crossing the border, then they just exaggerate the number. But we won't. That's for another podcast.
Right, and you invite one, and then the whole family comes.
The whole family comes over. The whole family comes over. But anyway, we're here, and like I said, thank you for being on the podcast today. And I wanted to get you on here to talk about a little bit Dia de los Muertos. Now, Dia de los Muertos is a tradition that's been around for centuries. A lot of people know about it, and a lot of people don't. Or some people are just becoming familiar with it, and then some people, the only thing they know about Dia de los Muertos is the movie Coco. So if we can kind of get into, I want to kind of dispel some preconceived notions, talk about its origins a little bit and what it is. Because I know a lot of times when I travel or I'm talking about the day, Dia de los Muertos, that some people that are not Hispanic or not familiar with it just think, oh, how morbid. I mean, you go to the cemetery and you have a picnic, or you celebrate. I mean, it is not something that is somber. It's not morbid. It's a celebration of life. So, can you kind of explain how Dia de los Muertos all started and why we celebrate it?
Well, the Dia de los Muertos actually goes back thousands of years, 3,000 to 5,000 years, to pre-Columbian, pre-Hispanic cultures that would celebrate, would venerate, would honor the dead. It was a tradition of the Mayans, the Mexicas, the Toltecs, the Olmecs, and hundreds of other indigenous people in all of Mesoamerica. And I think it's because, because they venerated, they honored their dead. And a long time ago, they didn't have cemeteries like we have now that were separate places from the home. When someone passed away, they would bury them sometimes under their home, sometimes, in the vicinity of their home. So the dead lived among, the dead were among the living. And so they were always present. And I think that lack of separation between life and death relates very much to the way that Mesoamerican viewed the world. And the Mexicas believed that a person had three souls, that the bodies would die and go back to earth. And a person's three souls, however, existed in multiple planes at once. And part of the soul would go to the afterlife, part of it would stay behind and watch over the loved ones. And so there was many different celebrations, many rituals, more than celebrations, I think rituals that would honor the dead, and the dead of those that stayed behind to guide the families. And so that's why they would leave food for a dead relative, sometimes burn incense, and that are all still part of the celebration today. But what happened is when the Spanish came in the 16th century...
Before we get to that, let me back up a little bit. So back in the day, there weren't cemeteries, and they used to bury them, did I hear you say, under the houses sometimes?
Under the houses. Sometimes you would have the homes. There was like a part underneath, and the dead were buried there, or they were buried outside of the home. So they were there with the family. So you would
in close proximity. The dead relatives were in close proximity to the home, or literally under the home.
Under the home, yes.
Wow. Okay.
And so they were together. The family continued to be together,
even in the afterlife.
Yes, so they were present, and so the idea of putting offerings, or putting the candles, not candles, but putting the incense. They were offerings to the dead because they were still together. And so those rituals would begin as of August and last through what we know now as November. It was a long time of venerating or honoring the rituals that happened to the dead, about the dead. And it was also the time of the harvest. So all of those kind of things started blending together.
Wow. So definitely, by today's standards, from a lot of people, things that go bump in the night. I mean, if you actually had generations of relatives living under your house, that'd be different. Okay, I get it, but it's perfectly normal in those times. Okay, I just wanted to get that clear in my head before. I didn't mean to interrupt. Wanted to get that clear, but you were talking about enter the Spaniards and whatever.
So when you think about it, when it's your family members, you're not going to be really scared of your family members. Well, unless
heck, there's a few family members I'm scared of now when they're living. No, but nobody had one.
There's a relationship. There's a relationship. There's a love. There's honor. There's respect.
Yes.
And so there wasn't that idea of fear. And of course, we didn't have the concept of good and bad and evil and heaven and hell. Those were all concepts that were introduced in the 16th century when the Spanish came. When the Spanish invaded this part of what we now know as the Americas, they brought with them Catholicism. And in Europe, of course, they had Todos Santos, which was a day to celebrate and to honor, to remember all of the saints. That holiday was created by the Catholic Church. That's on November 2nd, and then November 1st. And then on November 2nd, you have El Día de los Fieles Difuntos, which means the Day of the Dead. So you have those 2 days that there are Catholic, in origin, and Catholicism was the main religion, that was brought in through the Spaniards, Spanish into Mesoamerica. And so because the indigenous people, I mean, their beliefs were very much ingrained into their culture, into their beliefs. They wanted to, especially in the beginning, they wanted to continue to honor their dead because they had done that throughout centuries. And so then when the Spanish came and then they built their churches and they brought their customs, they continued to celebrate. The Spanish started doing the Dia de los Muertos, the Dia de los Difuntos, the Dia de los Santos. That was still in the fall. And so the indigenous people saw the opportunity to continue to honor their dead, but within the tradition of Catholicism. You had the church, because they built the churches with the stones of the pyramids, and next to the church, now they would have the cemeteries. And so those two places of worship were next to each other. So in the beginning, the indigenous people would not go into the churches because they were not used to worshiping the gods inside a building. It was always on the outside. And so because the cemeteries were on the outside, they would continue to go to the cemeteries and continue their traditions of honoring their deceased family members. But then everything started mixing, like candles. The indigenous people did not have candles. They used to have the branch from the ocote tree that you could turn it on, it would still light a little flame. And so they would use that in their worship. But when the Spanish came, they brought the candles and they started using the candles. The same thing with the bread. The bread they had tortilla and they had maíz, and they had, the tamal was a ritual food. But the bread, when they started making the bread, the indigenous people would make these little mounds of the bread. And then in the center, they would put a little bump, which signified the head. And the little cross was actually the little bones, the legs and the arms. So you have a little mound, and then you have the bones on top. And that's a pan de muerto. And it's similar to the body of Christ, because in Catholicism, you have the body of Christ. And
Right.
for Dia de los Muertos, you also have the body, but the body is now in a little bread.
Okay.
And then the sugar, the same with the sugar. When the sugar was brought, sugar cane was brought in from Africa and from the islands, and that was brought into the Americas. And so then they started making the sugar, the candy, and then the sugar skulls developed. The candy made out of that, then they made into the little sugar skulls that were also placed on instead of putting real skulls, now they put the sugar skulls.
So is it safe to say that the passing of a loved one or death in a lot of Latin American countries is perceived differently than we do here in the United States?
Well, it is still a loss. It's a loss and a grieving, and of course that's in all cultures where you grieve the passing of a loved one. But what is different is a belief that they come back. They come back. Their spirits come back. Usually 1 year after they pass away, they come back to visit the family, to once again be with the family. And that's why there are offerings set up in the homes. They call them ofrendas or altares, and they put the picture of the person. They put things that the person loved, like if the person loved hamburgers, here in the States, they would put a hamburger. If they lived in Mexico, they would probably get tamales and mole and, maybe a little tequila, if they like tequila, or an atole. And so these things are placed on the ofrendas, and also with the marigolds. The marigold is a flower that would actually grow during that time. It's a season of that kind of flower. The marigold in the Nahuatl language is called sempoal xochitl. Sempoal means 20 in Nahuatl, and xochitl means flowers. It's a flower of 20 petals. It's also the flower that glows. And so because of its color, it's an intense yellow. It would light the path, along with the candles, it would light the path for the souls to find their offerings. And they also put down copal. Copal is the smell, the copal would also bring the spirits in. And so
Ah,
there's many beautiful traditions.
That explains. I mean, when you look at a Dia de los Muertos celebration or parade or whatever, I mean, just the color. I mean, the vibrant colors and pageantry that goes with it is just totally amazing. I mean, it's breathtaking. I understand that monarch butterflies also have a significant
yes.
place
The monarch butterflies are supposedly the spirit. The spirit comes back on through the monarch butterfly, and they appear. It's pretty incredible because they make the journey from Mexico to the U.S., different places in the U.S. or other places, and then they fly back and they arrive in Michoacan. It's where they most of them arrive on the Day of the Dead in November, the beginning of November.
November.
So they see the spirits are coming in, and then they're here. They're in the cemetery on November 1st. That's for the children or the innocent. El Dia de los Angelitos. November 2nd is for the adults. So you have the 2 days, the November 1st and 2nd. And now they've even, I think this is an invented one, but that October 27th is the day for the pets.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Hey, another reason to celebrate. Why not? We'll build a little altar and put some Alpo on there. Talking about can you let's go into a little bit about that. Altars that are built. I mean, with the offerings and stuff. What do you know the origin of that, or as people leave these favorite items out or photographs? Offerings. Okay, how did that start, or why is it done?
Well, usually because the family was there with the home, and it was part of the home. The ancestors lived there too. They would put the petate. A petate is a grass mat. I don't know if you've heard the expression "ya se petateó," that person has passed away. Yes, because they're now on the petate, they're lying down now. So the petate would be the first, the layer, one of the layers, the inframundo, meaning the underground, and then you have either from 3 different layers to 9 layers. Some communities, some indigenous people have 9 layers. 9 symbolizing the 9 months, that you are in the womb, and then when you pass away, you have to go through the 9 levels to get to the inframundo. And so some altars, ofrendas, are 9 levels. The majority of them are 3 levels, which is the sky, the earth, and the underworld. And so they're built with the different levels, and on each level you put different things. The first thing usually that is set down is water, because when the souls are coming back, they're very thirsty, and so they need water, and so that symbolizes also purity. Also, the copal is to purify the area. The candles are to light the way. In addition to the marigold also has this incredible its smell, and so you can smell the marigolds, and you can also sometimes from the ofrenda to the cemetery, they get the little petals and make little paths so that the dead finds they see the marigolds, but then they follow the little path to get to the actual offering that is in the home of their family. And other things, of course, they put down are the bread, the mole, and depending on what region, even there's a region in actually the first place I ever went to called Mixqui outside of Xochimilco. They use a particular, it's like a pink donut, but it's a hard, and it's pink, hot pink, and it's called goyete. And the goyetes are placed, they symbolize the cráneo, the head, the skull, and they're hot pink because of the blood, but they're cookies, and they're delicious, but they do symbolize the head, the blood of the head, but in a donut shape. They're quite wonderful. They're big like that, like a big donut, and they're put on the altar. But that's only in Mixqui. Other places, there's another little town in Michoacan where they make the ofrendas, the offerings, on these little wooden horses, because they believe that they might get so many offerings, so many gifts, the spirits, that it's going to be a lot to carry home. And so they put the little horse and they attach all the offerings, the bananas, the fruits, to the little horse, and then the little horse helps the spirit take them home.
So I guess if you had a big family or were extremely popular, you'd need that little horse to
You need the little
take
horse.
all your offerings back with you. Okay.
So it's quite beautiful, and other places, like there's one town now in Michoacan. They also an artist. This is more like in the 70s. Started making Catrinas. Catrina is Lady Death. Lady Death that was originally invented or created by Jose Guadalupe Posada. It's a beautiful, skull lady with a big hat that actually symbolized the rich during the Porfiriato. They would make fun of the rich that we all, no matter if you're rich or poor, we're all going to end up as calacas, as skeletons at the end of the day. But he started, he was Juan Torres that went to Michoacan, Capula, and started making these skeletons in clay. And now the whole town makes them. They have some that are 30 feet tall, and now they're exporting them to all over the world. These images. But what's wonderful is the Day of the Dead not only provides a place for people to honor their family, but it also provides work for the artisans, for the bakers, for the flower vendors. Everyone, the whole community participates and enjoys, and somehow it becomes part of it. So it's a big community effort.
Now, recognize that when the Day of the Dead started, was it just in primarily Latin American countries, or was it celebrated in Spain or some other places, or in the Caribbean? Was it primarily Latin American countries, then it grew from there, or how did that start?
Well, what's unique in Mexico is because you have an intense, you have the Spanish and the Indigenous people. You have that encounter of those two cultures. So it's also celebrated or honored or in other Latin American countries, but it's very intense in the central Mexico and in the Mayan communities because they had a very advanced, I don't know if it's advanced the correct word, but I don't know, the Indigenous community continued to flourish even after the Spanish came. So those traditions continued. They continued in Michoacan. They continued in the center of Mexico where the Aztecs or the Nahuas were. And in fact, where I first saw, I didn't grow up with Dia de los Muertos either. And even though both of my parents are from Mexico, my father's from Jalisco, my mother's from Nuevo León, they would talk about many Mexican traditions, but they never talked about Dia de los Muertos. It was not until I went to Mexico City, and actually Dia de los Muertos, November 2nd, is my birthday. And so my boyfriend at that time, that later became my husband, Pio, he took me to Mixqui. Mixqui is a little Nahuatl Aztec community outside of Xochimilco, 16th century little town where they had the pyramids that were then converted into the churches. And so he took me for my birthday, and I experienced Dia de los Muertos for the first time in 1979. And I saw the people in the cemeteries. I saw the town plaza. It was beautiful ofrendas in the Zócalo. The children.
Okay, when you said you saw people, is it like that movie, I See Dead People? Or was it like the live?
No. I saw people honoring their family.
Oh, okay. So you didn't see deceased people. You saw. Okay, got it.
No,
just clarification there. Just clarification.
No, there are actually a little town in Campeche. Some families dig up the graves and they clean the bones. It's a clean.
No me digas. Really?
But it's very, it's just a little town, and it's, just few people still continue the tradition. They clean the bones and polish them and then put them back, so they get cleaned every year. Because again, they're their family, and if it was they want the best for their family. But that's very specific to that community. But what I saw was they called the alumbrada. The alumbrada is when they turn all the lights off in the whole little town, and only the candles remain in the cemeteries. It's beautiful, and you have like this golden gleam with the flowers, the light of the candles, and then the family. It was very solemn. Now we have a lot of the mariachis, the singing, and all that, but it was solemn, and the family members are there, and they have their little baskets with their food, their pan de muerto, their mole. The children are there, and so it's a very beautiful experience. And so I saw that, and I experienced that in the cemetery. Then I went to the town plaza, and all of a sudden I would see little processions walking down the street. We had tamales, we had mole, we had atole, champurrado, and I couldn't,
So that was definitely a memorable birthday for you then.
And so when we came back in 1984, Bio and I I knew about City of Austin and grants and nonprofits, and so I wrote a grant for $2,000 for City of Austin, and we got a grant, and we were at the Arts Warehouse, and we did our first Dia de los Muertos celebration, and we had collected books, a few videos to try to explain what that celebration was, and we got the community excited, and we did it, and we sent out 10,000 invitations that first time. And Watson and Casey gave us a grant for $2,000. We did it at the Arts Warehouse. We invited the community to put altares, and that was the first celebration. And even lowriders back then. We've been doing it since.
All right. Before we change subjects, Sylvia, thank you. This has been very, very educational. I know for me, hopefully for the listeners as well. But in this Dia de los Muertos, in that time period, November 1st, November 2nd, when you're honoring and the spirits are visiting, is there any type of stories or documentation of people actually encountering their ancestors?
Well, I think people encounter them in their hearts and in their minds, and they are, because it's a family event. All the family comes together to honor the dead. And so I think when you have all the families together thinking of one family members or their past, there's a reunion of family. They talk about the family member, what they liked, telling stories. And so I think the spirit comes back, whether it's in their minds or in their hearts. And, everyone has their own stories, but I think the presence is there through the memories of the people.
So Dia de los Muertos, even though it started in Latin American countries, primarily Mexico, as you said, with the Spanish and indigenous people influence, it's pretty much worldwide now, isn't it? I mean, we have Latinos everywhere, and a lot of people have gotten that custom or the tradition of celebrating Dia de los Muertos, and I know it's all over the U.S. Is it spread worldwide as well?
I think now, because of the internet and because of mass communication, it's hard not to, when there's something that's quite wonderful and spreads, through the internet, it's common to, and as you said, the Mexicans and the Latinos are everywhere. But I think it was into the 60s and 1960s, it was the Chicanos that the artists were probably the first to celebrate it on a city or cultural level. I'm sure the Mexicanos would continue to celebrate that here in their homes or in the churches, especially All Souls Day. It's still part of the Catholic religion. But it was the artists in California, self-help graphics were the first to start doing processions, first to do altares, to do images of Dia de los Muertos that were based on Jose Guadalupe Posada. It was not until I think the 70s there were some celebrations here in Austin through, I think Juanita Tejerina did some small events. Also Lucha, I think, did some here in Austin. But the large cultural urban traditions, I think it was started by Mexic-Arte. In 1984 was when we had our first one. And it's grown since. And it's
I remember.
A citywide event. They're in the churches and the schools, civic businesses put up ofrendas too. Down, I think San Antonio might have the largest Dia de los Muertos because there's massive investment there through the city where they have public sculptures. This year we're going to have a public sculpture at Republic Square that's created by two groups. One is Colectivo Última Hora, who does the large sculptures for the massive parade in Mexico City, and some of the local artists here. But it should be said that even in Mexico, they didn't have a citywide celebration until after the movie of James Bond, Spectre, 007.
Ah, yes, I remember.
And
Okay.
they created those gigantic props, Day of the Dead props, because they visited the Faro, which is a trade school for the arts in Iztapalapa, and they saw gigantic skeletons that the artists had made for a music concert, and they said, "Oh, we want those for our movie." And so then they commissioned them, and they did those. And after that movie was over, they left the props in Mexico City. So then the city said, "Oh, well, we should make a parade." And since then, thousands, millions of people go to Mexico City for these gigantic parades.
People are just dying to go there, right?
Yeah.
Inappropriate. Okay. So thank you very much. Before we run out of time, congratulations on not only your success of the recent parade, but also what you've done with the museum over there. And then you have an event coming up here soon, don't you? Let's talk about that event that you have at your museum.
Yes, we're having, it's going to be actually at the Republic Square, Calaveras of the Public Square in a Muertos Mercado. We're hoping to have it this weekend. If it's going to be raining and a thunderstorm, it'll be postponed till November the 9th. If not, it will be this weekend. So people can, visit our website to see. We're going to be meeting with the city to see if we can still have it this weekend. If not, on the 9th of November. But the exhibit will be up through November of 4 gigantic calaveras, cráneos, that are painted by local artists about the history of Austin. We're going to have one skull dedicated to the indigenous people, the Tonkawas, another one to the Mexican culture celebrations, one to the vendors, the candy makers and the tamale makers, and also the African American culture in downtown Austin. So come and visit Republic Square to see the calaveras of Republic Square, and then come visit the museum because every Sunday is free. They can come visit to see the ofrendas we'll have up through the rest of the year, actually, and to come and visit and see the ofrendas and a little bit about the Dia de los Muertos.
Perfect. And at that at the event or at the displays, will there be food vendors there as well?
Yes, we're going to have the Mercados de Muerto, which will have booths dedicated to marigolds, pan de muerto, tamales. We'll have papel picado. There'll be music and dance. So it'll be 9 to 1 is the time. It's a tianguis, a mercado, but specifically to Dia de los Muertos on Saturday, either this Saturday or the following Saturday.
Well, Sylvia, thank you so much for spending time with us today. It's been very, very educational. And I know I've learned a lot. I know I learned a lot, and I know our listeners did. For those out there, if this is your first time listening to Latino Business Report, please follow us. You can find our entire library of episodes online. We have over 100 episodes. You can also go to latinobusinessreport.com and find out more about us. Sylvia, thanks a lot, and we will see you at your next event. And any closing comments or anything you'd like to say before we go?
Well, just that I would like to thank all the artists, because none of this could be possible without all the artists, artisans, performers. In Austin, we have an incredibly talented group of people from the danzas, Guadalupanos Aztecas, to the piñata makers, but they're sculptors, Mónica Contreras and Sergio, who for many years have produced the mojigangas, the sculptures that we have in our parade, and many other groups, the Bike Zoo, that year after year you see all these incredible, talented people, and the majority of them son Mexicanos, Latinos, that are proud to desfilar, to parade their culture, their traditions in downtown Austin. And it's a time that we celebrate our culture, our traditions, and we're most happy to share that with all of Austin.
Absolutely. Congratulations, and a big shout out to all the artisans that make this celebration what it is today. Like I said, congratulations, Sylvia. I loved it. I loved it. I plan on going again next year. And I remember those early 80s when it was just a small little gathering. I mean, it looked like a family reunion, not even an event. But now with 20,000 plus people and a parade that lasts for an hour and a half. Wow.
It's still a family reunion, but with that many people. And a shout out to the Austin Lowriders, too.
Orale, Lowriders. Thanks for showing up, homies. Thanks for showing up. All right. So I know there's a lowrider show coming up here pretty soon at the end of November. I plan on going to that as well. So Sylvia, thank you for keeping Mexican and Latino culture alive, not only in Central Texas, but wherever you go. And once again, thank you for being on the show and everything you do. You've been listening to the Latino Business Report. My name is J.R. Gonzalez, and a shout out to our chief editor and assistant producer, Cortland. Cortland has now moved to Colorado, where he is working for Space Force. Pretty cool. But he still does Latino Business Report on the side. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.